Welcome everyone, Questine here with a discussion about a number of campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires that I would recommend everyone play at least once. Now, this isn't to say these are the best campaigns of the game, far from it, but rather that these campaigns will teach you a number of things. Whether or not you do learn those lessons or get annihilated by the AI, that is a very different discussion. So first off, we have Alif Nar of the High Elves. Alif Nar starts in a complicated geographic position. He starts with the monoliths, and the natural expansion path that you might have in this campaign would be to take the Broken Lands, deal with the Dark Elves, so on and so forth. Well, here's the problem with that. That puts you within striking distance of Be'lakor, and not just Be'lakor, but really he is going to be the main nuisance. So if you go over here, then there's a fairly high chance that you're going to have to defend this location from Be'lakor. But at the same time, you've got other issues to deal with. Tarox, Malekith, an objective that requires you to go for the Shrine of Cain. Which, I should add that these kind of objectives can be annoying. But it does force you to diversify the way you play this campaign in order to achieve your objectives. And that is a really good thing, because it forces you to deal with different campaign paths and how you plan around them. Or you could just abandon your starting province and go for Nagarath and then just sail back over here north. That is up to you. That's your decision. Another nice thing are all of these objectives that you do get in this campaign that can give you a good amount of money or various resources that you can use. Though it is annoying. To be clear, this campaign and the High Elves in general do need to be updated. The reason this particular campaign needs to be updated is every single time you start a campaign, you get these kind of objectives that are always randomized, and it can be annoying, especially when someone else eliminates the targets, but even with all the targets reset, you don't get new targets. You do if you eliminate them yourself. Pretty annoying system, but it is a good learning experience to deal with enemies surrounding you on all sides and deal with multiple fronts with limited resources. Because you may get money from doing some of these objectives, but you also have limited resources in quite a few ways. And number 4, it would be Loker Felheart of the Dark Elves, the Black Arc Master, the one who has more Black Arcs than anyone else in the Dark Elf campaign. And that is one of the good things that Loker does have. Yes, Black Arcs by default do take too long to actually construct. It is annoying, and it is one of the things he should change. So you do have more tactical flexibility with respect to that, and that's great. You also have more tactical flexibility on the campaign map than you might imagine. You might think in this campaign that, oh, I'm gonna have to fight Cathay and maybe ally the Skaven, but you don't need to. See, you do have a certain level of aversion with Cathay, to be certain on that. And that might create problems that you have to deal with. But nothing in your campaign victory conditions requires you to actually end up fighting Cathay. You can, if you want to. That is really your choice. But you can just as easily, well, not necessarily quite as easily, but you can end up actually allying Cathay if you so desire. And that is a choice. How do you play it? Who do you go for as certain allies? And it's all perfectly viable. And that's one of the things, like with Morathi, yeah, you do have a lot of choices with Morathi diplomatically. But I think like in this one, in the short term at least, like Morathi has a lot more choices than the long term. But in the short term, I think Loker has a lot more interesting choices to make with regards to his Black Arcs, with regards to his recruitment, with regards to the focus of his campaign, what he's going to look to take. Is he going to focus purely on Cathay? Are you going to go, or are you going to get Karen Carr and try and stop Alif Nar one way or another? And that is the brilliant part, I would say, in this specific campaign. It does help make this campaign a lot better. It does give it, well, not necessarily a sense of replayability, but does create a fairly unique experience regardless of how you choose to play this campaign. For what it's worth, Skaven may not necessarily make the best allies, at least on legendary difficulty, but you might just want to conquer all of Cathay together with Snitch. You might want to ally Chaos if that's your choice. That's the thing. The Dark Elves benefit from the fact that while plenty of factions do dislike them to a degree or another, only the High Elves really despise them, and that is something you can use to achieve diplomatic dominance on the campaign map. And given the multitude of factions that are in Cathay, the options are there in this specific campaign. So I'd recommend playing it at least once. Having fun with the Black Arcs, that's one of the things, like how do you use multiple Black Arcs, how do you prioritize that recruitment, how do you make it work, how do you use those kind of options, and just enjoying the pirate lifestyle. This faction, this Legendary Lord, by the way, is the dominant naval faction in the entire game, forget the Vampire Coast, just kind of worth saying that. So if you want to play a faction that is really focused on naval aggression, this is it. Which is a very different playstyle than you might see in other campaigns as well. At number 3, it would be Azag the Slaughterer. Why not Grimgor? Why not Skarsnik? Why not Warzag? Well, it ultimately comes down to this: diplomacy. See, Greenskins are hated by a great deal of races, but not necessarily Azag. Azag gets a diplomatic benefit with the Vampire Count, so that means he can make alliances with people like Vlad. Not just people like Vlad, of course, but that is kind of one of the points. Of course, you can always go smash, kill, burn if you want to as a greenskin, but I think that's kind of really missing the point of this campaign potential. The sheer amount of diplomacy that is simply not available in any other greenskin campaign. Or if it is available, but it's kind of pointless. For Azag, though, the key point is not just Vlad, it's also Kislev. The Empire hates you, the Dwarves hate you, but Kislev is kind of focused on other people. You know, the people from the north coming in to kill every single one of them. So they will ally a greenskin if you help them out. It's like one of the things you can do as Azag, and maybe the developers knew what they were doing because there is a camp right here. But one of the things you can do as a Zeg is you take Fort Chekova camp on turn 2, and then take Fort Chekova. And then you sell it to Katrin. Then maybe you go to Igorov. You get an alliance with Katrin, a defensive alliance. She won't necessarily like you if you beat up the Empire, which is actually one of your campaign objectives. But if you beat up Trika, that ends up being a bit of a different discussion. So you can actually play that diplomatic game. And you know what? Maybe you can let other factions be obliterated, like Asen being destroyed by Festus, and then you swoop in and save the Empire. Well, even the Empire might start changing their minds on this. The only faction you do have to fight is Ungrim Iron Fist, but you got the tools to deal with that. As for Forgrim, well, that kind of depends on what Skarsnik and Gorbat do. Though, given the situation that Forgrim is in between Gorbat, Skarsnik, and even Scrag, chances are that he might end up dead in a lot of campaigns, so he's not necessarily a problem. Of course, going for Kislev and the Empire is just one of the options that is available in this campaign. It isn't the only option. You can also go over here and beat up Grimgor, if you want, and get control of over his empire. And Grimgor might take a lot of territory, you just need to defeat him in battle. But you do have a good amount of choices that aren't necessarily present in other greenskin campaigns. Certainly not to this point, either because those greenskin campaigns start in locations that their campaign plan ends up feeling one-dimensional, or because they're surrounded by so many factions that are utterly despise them that trying to engage in diplomacy is a completely pointless exercise. So this is one of the reasons I do like this campaign. Also cosplaying Nagash, basically, or Nagash cosplaying as a greenskin, that's also this specific campaign, because, yeah, that's a fragment of Nagash in Azag's crown that he's wearing over there. And number 2, it is Nakari. For all the issues Slaanesh has as a race, and make no mistake, they are legion, I think Nakari is one of the best campaigns to play in the game once. Exactly once. If you can succeed in it. The reason I say that is Nakari is certainly very ill-suited for the situation that she finds themselves in. Because you do have the High Elves with all the power that they have. And the High Elves are a really good counter for Slaanesh. Because you consider Slaanesh. What is Slaanesh about? It's about fast-moving, low armor, low durability units that can do a lot of damage with flanking or charging. Well, guess which race has a bunch of very cheap spearmen and really powerful cheap archers? Yes, the High Elves. So this is a problem for you to deal with. They do hard counter you. You're really good against demons because melee situation is different, but you're not good at all against High Elves. But the campaign objectives over here do require you to deal with Avalorn, Etain, and Everest. That opens up a whole list of possibilities in this specific campaign on how you achieve that. That's really the question. How do you manage to do it? There's all kinds of ways. Vassalization, diplomacy, pure military force. Do you go for Alariel very quickly? Do you go for Elfarian very quickly? Or do you go for Elfarian and then turn around and try and deal with Alariel? There are ways to play this campaign, especially now that the cults for Slaanesh have been changed and you can just teleport Nakari over here to Safari and, beat up Alariel or turn on Tyrion if you so desire. So there are choices, there are consequences to those choices, and you're playing a faction that has low durability units that are fast in an area that doesn't suit that kind of playstyle. Also, you have very limited recruitment slots and limited replenishment. I'd recommend getting the Champions of Chaos DLC if you're going to play this campaign and getting Forsaken of Slaanesh and then Chaos Warriors of Slaanesh, but understand that even with those, this is still going to be a hell of a campaign to actually play. But if you do it once, you learn a lot about how to handle battles, and not just battles, how you handle a situation like this on the campaign map. So that's the reason I would recommend you play at least once, or play it until you succeed in that goal. Once you've succeeded once with that goal, there's no more worth in playing Nakari, but just achieving that once is a really great and actually fun experience. I certainly enjoyed it when I did it once. I will probably never do it again until they change Slaanesh. And finally, at number 1, it would be Tsarina Katrin of Kislev. Now, don't get me wrong on this. Katrin is an awful legendary lord, and Kislev is a very bad race in so many ways in Immortal Empires. But that's kind of the point in this campaign. While Kislev is a bad race, you do have a pretty solid military roster between hybrid melee units, hybrid range units with Kostars, so armor Kostars as hybrid melee range units, Kostars as hybrid range melee units. You do have a good amount of military capability. The problem is you're surrounded on all sides. You've got Greenskins to the east, Vampires to the south, Wood Elves to the south, you've got Festus to the west, you've got Frot, Azazel, Trog, Wolfric, and if you think Norska is going to be gentle to you, oh, no, that's not going to happen. Then you have Arbol being introduced. Let me tell you why Arbol is so damn scary to deal with. Because out of the Chaos Legendary Lords in the game, Khorne is kind of in that situation where, under the control of the AI, they can recruit a lot of units very quickly, and let's just say that dealing with Bloodletters and Chaos Warriors en masse is not exactly a great dynamic for Kislev, which has a limited economy and various campaign restrictions. But the reason I would recommend this campaign is you can manage it. For instance, Kislev has no limitation on Confederation, unless you're trying to do it with Kastaltin. And when I say limitation, I mean the cooldown period between you confederating one faction and then confederating the other. So you can play this campaign in many different ways, and you might think that naturally what the game wants you to do is go deal over here with Azag, but that is actually a really bad decision, partly because Ungrim will almost always end up in a war with Azag these days, and so will Draika. So going over there to the east, well, let's just say all of Kislev will burn if you do so, especially on a higher difficulty. So you gotta manage your southern, western, eastern, and northern front at the same time. Limited resources, relying on, well, you can cheese in this campaign, you can engage in regular diplomacy if you want, you can throw yourself against the brick wall and try and break through with it, or you can learn how the game actually works on a systems level and make that work for you. Because there's a lot of little things that you do learn or are forced to learn if you want to play this campaign effectively. Like, oh, training a bunch of ice switches in another Kislev campaign in order to get these ice switches and frost maidens through the load save character system is a really powerful tool. For instance, trading regions you don't need to other factions and then manipulating those factions to end up in a war with one another is another thing you can do. I'm not talking here about abusing necessarily region trading. I'm just talking about kind of how it was designed. Like, region trading just gives you diplomatic options. You can abuse it. It's very easy to abuse if you sell with barracks, but you can also just use the system in perhaps the way it was intended to be used. But regardless of how you play this campaign, there are many different ways that work. It isn't a great campaign. It isn't going to be necessarily a fun campaign, but as a learning tool, this is the one campaign I played the most, with exception of Malachi. And for a reason. This is the campaign that can teach a lot of players how to become a lot better at the game, because it is going to throw you on that deep end and tell you, go deal with it. And I think that's what makes it good right now. But let me be clear, she needs a rework, Kislev needs a freaking rework, and hopefully we will get that.